Okay, it's a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me. We're very glad to be here.
So to start, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you want us to know about yourself and your campaign?
Yeah, sure. My name is Shannon Liss-Riordan. I am really excited to be running for Attorney General. I have been a workers' rights advocate my whole career. I've been representing working people and unions for more than 20 years. I have led teams of lawyers, taken on some of the biggest corporations in America who've been cheating working people, companies like Starbucks and FedEx and Uber and Amazon and IBM and Harvard University, and I've recovered a lot of money that these companies have stolen from workers, more than $500 million over the course of my career. I've gotten back into working people's pockets. I have represented all types of working people, waitresses, janitors, firefighters, construction workers, Uber drivers, strippers, and I've helped build the law here in Massachusetts and around the country to help protect their rights. I went to law school in order to be a voice for the disenfranchised and try to even the playing field a bit, between people who've had a voice and those who, have fancy high-priced lawyers who've been able to defend them in court. And so I've been really excited to do that work, and now I'm running for Attorney General because I want to bring my skills and my experience and my passion to fight for justice and for regular people to everyone around Massachusetts. So thank you for having me today.
Of course, thank you. So we're going to get on to some issue-based questions. I'm going to start with gun violence. So question 1 is, at UTEC, we advocate for gun violence prevention. For example, in last year's budget, we successfully got $10 million to do this work. This funding would help support nonprofits statewide. With that in mind, would you support this statewide funding in future budgets? Yes or no, and why?
I absolutely would support the funding. I think gun violence is just such a tragedy that we need to be taking every action we can to prevent, this horrific plague of people getting affected, families, communities torn apart by gun violence. Here in Massachusetts, we have some pretty good gun safety laws compared to other parts of the country. That's why we haven't had as many, terrible mass shootings here as, we've been seeing in other parts of the country. I've got 3 kids, and, every time I hear about one of these incidents, it just makes my heart sink. So I think there's so much that we need to do. We need to, well, for one thing, I believe we need to hold gun manufacturers accountable for the devastation that they've been causing to our communities. That's the kind of impact litigation that I've been doing as a lawyer for more than 2 decades. So I want to make sure that gun manufacturers realize that they may be held accountable for the violence and the devastation they cause. We have the U.S. Supreme Court, as I'm sure you know about, has issued some really terrible rulings over the years, and particularly this year. And one of them has struck down a law in New York, which was, trying to keep communities safe from gun violence. And our legislature here in Massachusetts has tried to respond to that ruling, but I think it's really important that we don't overreact too much. We've got some really good, solid laws here, and we need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to protect ourselves, protect our communities, and our police departments have the ability to issue permits, make decisions in issuing permits so that guns don't get into the wrong hands. There's a lot of work that needs to be done among attorneys general in different states to keep unlawful guns from coming in here from other states that don't have as good laws as we have. So there's a lot that I would do as Attorney General to protect our communities and our families from gun violence.
Awesome, thank you. So question 2 is related to housing. As justice involves young adults, access to housing has become an interest to us. Many of us, because of our backgrounds, find it difficult to find places to live that are affordable and would even consider renting to us. Can you share your vision with us about affordable and accessible housing?
Housing is one of the issues that I've heard the most about as I've been traveling around the state. The cost of everything is just going through the roof these days, and finding a place to live that you can afford is it's holding so many people back.
Right.
You know, it's holding people back from, you know, being able to get on with their lives, you know, have families, have jobs if you're worried about, you know, how to just pay the rent and keep a roof over your head. So that's why one of the proposals that I have that I plan to implement as Attorney General is to set up an office of the tenant advocate, because in housing courts these days, the landlords have legal representation. The tenants don't have representation by and large. So I want the Attorney General's office to be providing representation to tenants to, again, even the playing field and make sure that tenants have access to the resources that may be able to help keep them in their homes. We need to provide mediation services between landlords and tenants so that our housing courts aren't just eviction mills. And I would also fight housing discrimination, which is what I've been doing as a civil rights lawyer for more than 20 years, you know, going after landlords who are discriminating against tenants, you know, make sure that everyone has access to safe, affordable housing. You know, I think housing is a human right. Another issue it's really important about housing that isn't talked about so much these days, but you know, we still have a really bad problem with lead paint and our housing stock here in Massachusetts. It's a really serious issue, and it affects health and development of children in particular. And we've got these laws on the books from a long time ago, the 1970s, that was supposed to help with the lead paint problem, and basically it's just led to rampant discrimination against families with children under the age of 6. Because landlords don't want to rent to them because, you know, they think they're going to have to do lead. We need to get a policy in place that will lead us to actually getting our housing stock de-leaded. And as Attorney General, I will fight discrimination against families with children and anyone who's kept from a home because of discriminatory reasons.
Thank you. Question number 3 is going to be based on justice. As you know, there are individuals in the state who are currently doing time because of cannabis. Cannabis has become legalized, yet it continues to negatively impact our communities because of incarceration. Would you consider expunging all cannabis possession convictions, and why? In your opinion, why hasn't it happened yet?
Yeah, I've been talking about this a lot during this campaign. I absolutely support expunging records of anyone who has who's been incarcerated or has anything on their record related to cannabis. It's perfectly legal here in Massachusetts, and having these, if you've got your record marred based on something that's now legal here, it just makes no sense, and it's holding folks back from, you know, pursuing education, getting jobs. And I also think that people who have served time or who have suffered because of these types of things on their records, you know, deserve compensation for it. So I'm a strong advocate for that. Something I'm also very concerned about with this new growing cannabis industry we have now is how we've seen it happens in so many industries where power gets concentrated in the hands of a few big providers. So there are these multi-state operators who are now scooping up all the cannabis dispensaries because of the impact that the totally failed war on drugs had on communities of color. We need to be using this as an opportunity to provide opportunities for those communities that have been disadvantaged by the war on drugs, and that's communities of color primarily. I was in Springfield just last week, and I toured a dispensary that is about to open, and it's owned by a family-owned, black-owned, woman-owned cannabis dispensary, and the CEO, she gave me a tour of what they're planning to do, and she told me about how difficult it has been for her to navigate this whole approval process, whereas these big multi-state operators are like waiting just to scoop in and try to scoop it up, but she's holding strong and trying to do this. So we need to be supporting, you know, these family-owned operations, black-owned, women-owned. I thought it was really wonderful to see what she's doing.
Awesome, thank you. This is going to be our last issue-based question, number 4. It's going to be about police accountability. So during COVID, there was a racial uprising, and we saw firsthand what can happen to an individual in the hands of law enforcement. What would you do about officers who have a history of abusing their power? Would you help keep such individuals accountable to their actions?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is what I've been doing for my career as a lawyer, is holding actors accountable to our laws. We have seen so much pain caused in recent years. You know, the murder of George Floyd 2 years ago, it really led to a reckoning in this country about we really have to come to terms with what are we doing with our police forces. We cannot, prosecute our way out of issues like mental illness and addiction and poverty, and we all saw what happened with George Floyd. It created this just resurgence of outrage in our communities, and we need to hold police departments accountable and make sure that they've got proper training and that they're not above the law. So I've taken on police departments as part of my work as a civil rights lawyer. I've been working with the ACLU for a couple of years on a project to try to get police departments to be more accountable. We've done public records requests to police departments across the state to get data on their interactions with community residents, racial data on the breakdown of arrests and interactions with residents. And those police departments that are not being too responsive, we're about to file suit against a police department that's not being responsive with this kind of data. So that's the kind of work I would do as Attorney General, is make sure that police departments are transparent, that they're keeping records about what these disparities are. And as Attorney General, I will go after disparities. There are disparities in how people are being handled by the police based on their race. That's illegal, and I will do something about that. A few months ago, for instance, I took this case on involving black students in a Georgia school district who were suffering very disparate discipline from their white counterparts. That's the kind of work that I've been doing, I would do. So there's a lot that needs to be done there to build trust. And just one other thing, I've done work on working to diversify police departments across the state, which I think is so important to build trust between police departments and communities that they serve. I challenged the Massachusetts State Civil Service system, which used a discriminatory exam to hire police officers, which was having a disparate impact on officers of color. And as a result of winning that trial, we got black and brown police officers and firefighters hired across Massachusetts. So that's the kind of work that I would continue to do and go after in the Attorney General's office.
Awesome, thank you. We're going to move on to these two pretty quick, basic yes or no questions based on budget advocacy. I'm going to start with question 1. So at UTEC, we work on advocacy locally, statewide, and coalitions. We even go up to the State House to advocate for young adults statewide and their services. Would you support our work advocating through the legislative cycle and budgetary cycle of the State House through writing written testimonies and participating on advocacy days with us? Yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome, thank you. Question 2. Would you help us highlight issues at the state level, like raising the age for juvenile convictions, expanding expungement, and housing for formerly incarcerated individuals? Yes or no?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the age should be raised to 21 before you have to be involved in the adult criminal system.
Thank you. And to finish, this is a question that we really wanted to ask you. What is your vision for supporting emerging adults who are justice involved like us?
Well, I am so excited to hear and see what you're doing here. This brings back a lot of memories for me of work that I did back when I was in my 20s. The age of 17 to 25 is such a crucial period of time in people's lives. So back when I was in my early 20s, I was an activist and an organizer. I co-founded a young women's organization that was getting young women involved in the political process, but it was broader than that, and we worked very hard and intentionally to be a multiracial coalition. I co-founded it with Rebecca Walker, and we created this national organization. We got young people on buses. This is summer of 1992. We called it Freedom Summer 1992. It was patterned after the Freedom Rides of the 60s. We got a diverse coalition of young people on buses. We traveled across the country, all the way to California, back to the South, and registered people to vote.
Oh, wow.
And the coalition that we put together, it was young people, men, women, all races, all backgrounds, came together as a community. For a month we spent on those buses, connecting with community groups and voter advocacy groups and other nonprofits. And it was just really such an amazing experience, because a lot of the people who joined us on that bus ride were from so many different backgrounds. You know, people who were housing insecure, people who had, like many of the participants in your program, you know,
Right.
been part of the criminal justice system. And this was just such an eye-opening experience to have this common mission, which was to get more young people involved in the political process and be aware of their power to do something,
Yeah.
you know, when they come by coming together to making their voices heard. And so when I see what you're doing here, it just brings back all of these memories and this great hope, you know, of what young people can do. You know, you set your mind to it and you see a path, and you're helping bring other young people along that path to a very hopeful future. So I'd love to see what you're doing here. Would love to support you in what you're doing, and I think it is a model, and I hope that others around the country are paying attention and taking note.
Thank you so much. So that's the end of our interview portion, and I want to thank you for being here with us. To end this off, do you think we can take a group picture?
Oh, yeah, that'd be awesome.
Awesome.